All right, so are you ready to take a deep dive with us today?
I am always ready for a deep dive.
Excellent, excellent. So today we are going to be talking about a book that I'm sure many of our listeners have at least heard of.
A classic.
A classic, indeed. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis.
A very, very good book.
A very good book. And we are here to help you, our listeners, figure out, is it really worth your time to read this book?
Oh, it is.
Or, maybe you've seen the movies. Is it worth it to actually go and read the book? So that is our goal today. And to help us with this deep dive, we have a few sources that we'll be pulling from.
Awesome.
We've got an article from Literary Potpourri, which is a blog.
Okay.
And they did a review of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. We've got some information from Goodreads about the book itself, about C.S. Lewis. And then, of course, we've got those wonderful Goodreads reviews.
Always helpful.
Always helpful. Those are some of my favorite.
Yeah.
And then I also have some information about how to structure a good book review video. So we'll see if we can live up to that today.
I think we can.
Okay, good. I like your confidence.
Yeah.
So I guess to get started,
Yeah.
you already said this is a very good book, and I think a lot of people would agree with you, especially if they've read it. But we're talking about, people who maybe haven't read it yet.
Right.
Maybe they're not sure if they want to add it to their maybe already very, very long TBR.
Oh, yeah.
So what makes it so good? Why is it worth reading?
Well, it's a classic for a reason. It really is. And like you said, some people might think, oh, I've seen the movie, so I'm good. But the book is so much richer. I mean, the movie does a good job, but there's so much more to the story when you actually sit down and read it.
Okay, so convince me.
Okay, so let's talk about the food.
The food.
Okay, the food. Yes, Lewis's descriptions of the meals in Narnia are they're so vivid and enticing. You can practically taste them.
Okay, give me an example, because I know they have food in the movies, too.
Well, think about when Lucy first meets Mr. Tumnus. He invites her back to his caves, and he makes her tea, and he has all these delicious treats laid out.
Yeah.
Scones and cakes and all kinds of goodies.
So how is that different in the book?
Well, it's the level of detail.
Yeah.
The Literary Potpourri review actually talked about this. They said that Lewis's descriptions of the food are almost like something out of an Enid Blyton novel.
Okay.
It has that really cozy, heartwarming feeling.
So the food plays a bigger role than just being, food.
Exactly. It becomes a symbol of warmth and hospitality and comfort.
Interesting.
Especially in a world that's, shrouded in eternal winter.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so the food is one thing that stands out. What else?
Well, I think the setting itself is just incredibly immersive.
Right.
Even though Narnia is under this curse of always winter, Lewis still manages to create these little pockets of warmth and beauty. Like, think about Mr. Tumnus's cave. It's cozy and inviting, and then you have the Beaver's Dam, which is full of, the smells of baking bread and that delicious stew they make.
So even though it's always winter, it's not like this bleak, depressing world.
No, not at all. There's still a sense of hope and joy, and you really feel that through the descriptions of the setting.
Okay, that's a good point. Now, I do have a question about Aslan.
Oh.
Because he's obviously a very important character in both the book and the movie.
Right.
But I was reading some of the reviews on Goodreads, and a few people mentioned that they found him to be a bit too passive.
Interesting.
Yeah, like if he's this all-powerful lion, why does he even need the children to defeat the White Witch? Couldn't he just handle it himself?
That's a good question, and it's something that a lot of people have wondered about, and I think it comes down to the allegorical nature of the story.
Okay, so here we got the allegory.
The allegory, yes.
Okay.
Lewis was a devout Christian, and the story is definitely meant to be read on a symbolic level.
Okay.
But I don't think it's heavy-handed at all. You can enjoy the story without even picking up on the Christian symbolism.
Because I have to admit, that's one thing that kind of makes me hesitant about reading some books. If it's like too preachy, I don't know.
I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it. But I think Lewis does a really good job of weaving the allegory into the story in a way that feels natural and organic.
Well,
It's not like he's hitting you over the head with it.
right. Okay, good. Because I do like a good story, but I don't want to feel like I'm sitting in a sermon.
No, this is definitely not a sermon. It's an adventure story, first and foremost,
Okay.
but with these deeper layers of meaning if you choose to look for them.
Interesting.
So you can appreciate it on multiple levels.
I like that. So it's like a story that can grow with you.
Exactly. You can read it as a child and enjoy the adventure, and then reread it as an adult and discover all these new layers of meaning.
That's cool. Okay, well, I'm definitely intrigued. We've talked about the food, the setting, the allegory.
Yes.
What else What else can you tell me to really convince me that this is a book worth reading?
Well, let's talk about how it compares to other classic children's fantasies,
Oh, okay.
because I think that's a really helpful way to kind of understand what makes The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so special.
All right, I'm listening.
So the Literary Potpourri Review actually made a really interesting comparison to The Wizard of Oz.
Oh,
They said that both stories emphasize the power of childlike belief.
yeah.
It's that sense of wonder and imagination that allows the children to see and experience the magic of these other worlds.
Right. Like the adults would never believe it.
Exactly. The adults are too jaded, too caught up in the real world. But children, they still have that sense of possibility,
Right.
and that's what makes them the perfect heroes for these kinds of stories.
Okay, so it's similar to The Wizard of Oz in that way, but what makes it different?
Well, one thing that sets The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe apart is its portrayal of human flaws.
Human flaws, okay.
Yes, Lewis doesn't shy away from showing that even in a magical world, people make mistakes, they struggle with temptation, they experience real emotions.
So it's not just like a black and white good versus evil kind of story.
Right. There's a lot of nuance to the characters, and that makes them feel more real, more relatable.
Give me an example.
Well, the most obvious example is Edmund Pett.
Oh, yeah, Edmund.
His betrayal of his siblings is a really powerful moment in the story.
Right.
And it's something that a lot of people can relate to on some level. You know, we've all made mistakes. We've all been tempted to do things that we know are wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lewis really explores the complexities of Edmund's character. We see him struggle with guilt and shame, and eventually we see him find redemption.
So it's a journey.
It is. It's a journey. And it's a reminder that even when we make mistakes, we can always choose to change. We can always choose to do better.
Okay, I like that.
So that's one of the things that makes The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so powerful. It's not just a fun adventure story. It's a story about real people with real problems.
And real emotions.
And real emotions, even in a magical world.
I like it. Okay, well, I'm convinced.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm adding this to my TBR. What about you, listener? Are you convinced yet?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Are you going to add it to your TBR as well? I think we've made a pretty good case so far.
I think so.
But we're going to keep going because we're just getting started with this deep dive into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, there's so much more to talk about.
There is so much more to talk about. And, we talked about the Christian allegory. But one thing I'm curious about is, C.S. Lewis, he was a scholar of mythology.
He was.
So do you think there are any other sort of non-Christian influences that we might find in the book if we look closely enough?
Oh, I'm sure there are. I mean, he was steeped in mythology and folklore, and I think a lot of that seeped into his writing, even if it wasn't intentional.
So it's like a little treasure hunt?
It is. It's like a literary treasure hunt.
Waiting for us to discover all these hidden meanings and connections.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what makes reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so rewarding. There's always something new to discover.
So to our listener, keep that in mind as you're reading.
Pay attention to those details.
Pay attention to those details. You might be surprised at what you find.
You never know.
You never know. All right, you're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back with more of our deep dive into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Can't wait. It's like he's inviting us to play detective and see what other connections we can make.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the Christian allegory. Are there any other sort of literary or mythological influences that you think might be at play here?
Well, one thing that the Literary Potpourri Review mentioned was the comparison to other classic children's fantasies like The Wizard of Oz or Peter Pan.
Okay.
And I think that's a really helpful way to kind of understand what makes The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so special.
Okay.
So like Peter Pan, it emphasizes the power of childlike belief.
Right.
It's that sense of wonder and imagination that allows the children to see and experience the magic of Narnia.
Yeah, because the adults, they just wouldn't get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're too caught up in the real world to believe in something like Narnia. But children, they still have that open-mindedness, that sense of possibility.
Right. And that's why they're the ones that get to go on these amazing adventures.
Exactly. They're the chosen ones in a way.
Okay. I like that. So it's similar to Peter Pan in that sense, but what makes it different from something like The Wizard of Oz?
Well, I think one thing that sets The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe apart is its portrayal of human flaws.
Human flaws.
Yes. Lewis doesn't shy away from showing that even in a magical world, people make mistakes, they struggle with temptation, they experience real emotions.
So it's not just a simple fairy tale then?
No, it's definitely more than that. There's a lot of depth to the characters, and that makes them feel more real, more relatable.
Give me an example.
Well, the most obvious example is Edmund and his betrayal of his siblings.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really powerful moment in this story.
Yeah, and it's not something that you would typically see in a lighthearted children's book.
Right. It's a pretty dark moment, actually. But I think it's important because it shows that even children are capable of making bad choices. And it also shows that even when we make mistakes, there's always hope for redemption.
Okay, so it's journey.
It is a journey, and it's
Yeah.
something that I think a lot of people can relate to on some level. We've all made mistakes. We've all been tempted to do things that we know are wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lewis really explores the complexities of Edmund's character. We see him struggle with guilt and shame, and eventually we see him find forgiveness.
So it's a story about second chances.
It is. It's a story about second chances, and it's a reminder that no matter how far we fall, we can always find our way back.
Okay, I like that.
And I think that's one of the things that makes The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe so powerful. It's not just a fun adventure story. It's a story about real people with real problems and real emotion.
And real growth.
And real growth, even in a magical world.
That's great. Okay, well, I'm sold. I think we made a pretty compelling case for why people should read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add? Any other key takeaways that you think our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the book offers a much richer and more nuanced experience than the movie.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You get to delve deeper into the characters' thoughts and motivations, and you really get a sense of the magic and wonder of Narnia.
And those delicious descriptions of Narnian food.
Yes, the food. Cannot forget the food.
That's one of the things I'm most excited about.
It's like a feast for the senses.
It really is.
Oh.
So to our listeners, if you're looking for a book that will transport you to another world, a world filled with magic and adventure and also some really important life lessons, then I highly recommend checking out The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
I second that.
And if you've already read it, maybe it's time for a reread.
You won't be surprised at what you discover.
Because there's always something new to find.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a book that you can revisit again and again and still find something to appreciate.
All right, well, on that note, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
And for taking this deep dive with us.
We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll join us again next time for another deep dive into a different literary world.
Until then, happy reading.
Happy reading.
And you know what else is fun?
What's that?
Rereading it as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
You pick up on so many things that you missed as a kid.
Yeah.
Like those little details and nuances that just went right over your head when you were younger.
I could definitely see that. Like, I'm already thinking about all the things I want to pay attention to when I reread it.
Oh, yeah. It's like a whole new experience.
And, we talked about the Christian allegory, but I'm curious, did any of the Goodreads reviewers mention any other literary or mythological influences?
That's a great point because C.S. Lewis, he was a scholar of mythology.
He was.
So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some other influences at play.
Yeah, I mean, even just thinking about the basic premise of the story, the magical wardrobe that acts as a portal to another world.
Right.
That's a pretty common motif in mythology and folklore.
It is. There are so many stories about magical doorways and hidden realms.
Exactly. So it's like Lewis took that idea and made it his own.
And he did it brilliantly.
He really did. Okay, well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
So to recap, why should people read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Well, first of all, it's just a really good story.
It is a good story.
It's exciting and engaging, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat.
And the characters are so well developed.
They are.
Yeah.
You really care about what happens to them.
Even Edmund.
Even Edmund.
Okay, good.
And I think that the book also has a lot to say about important things like courage and faith and the power of love.
Yeah, those themes really come through.
And I think that's what makes it such a timeless story.
It is timeless.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that you can read at any age and still get something out of it.
Exactly. And it's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
Okay, so we've established that it's a good story.
Yes.
It's got great characters.
Yeah,
it explores important themes.
Yes.
What else can we add to our list of reasons why people should read this book?
Well, we can't forget about the magic.
The magic. Oh, yes.
The world of Narnia is just so enchanting and imaginative.
And immersive.
And immersive. Lewis's descriptions are so vivid, you really feel like you're there.
I'm already planning my trip to Narnia.
Me too. Just gotta find that wardrobe.
Exactly. Okay, so it's a good story.
Yeah.
It's got great characters. It explores important themes. It's magical. What else?
Well, it's also a book that can be enjoyed on multiple levels.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, you can read it as a simple adventure story, or you can dig deeper and explore the allegory and symbolism.
Right, so it's a book that can grow with you.
Exactly. You can read it as a child and enjoy the adventure, and then reread it as an adult and discover all these new layers of meaning.
That's one of the things I love about classic literature.
Me too. There's always something new to discover.
All right, well, I think we've made a pretty compelling case.
I think so too.
So to our listeners, if you haven't already read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I highly recommend adding it to your TBR list.
And if you have read it, maybe it's time for a reread.
Because like we said, there's always something new to discover.
And if you do reread it, let us know what you think.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
You can leave a comment on our website or send us an email.
And who knows, maybe we'll even do another deep dive into the Narnia series in the future.
That would be fun.
It would be. So until then, happy reading.
Happy reading, everyone.
And may your journey to Narnia be filled with magic and wonder.